true self-love is the only way we can love others. So in a way, human is also like an onion, and there are many sheaths, 5 sheaths. So these sheaths are Annamaya Kosha, the outermost sheath. So the next is the Pranamaya Kosha. So the third sheath is Manomaya Kosha. Fourth sheath is the Vijnanomaya Kosha. Fifth layer is the Anandamaya. There are 2 poles to man, intention and ability. Mistake, if it is a fault of ability pole, I can always forgive myself because I always know that I'm only human. So, we have seen a few weeks ago a series of videos about how to reprogram the subconscious mind, and subconscious mind is so important for our lives, experience, and how it is a very important factor in life, controls circumstances of life. Even the physical body is affected more by our belief system, biology of belief. Writer Bruce Lipton we saw, and he is a very powerful proponent of that. And if you remember, in his interview, Bruce Lipton had mentioned Anita Moorjani as a poster case for what he's telling, if you remember, right?
Right, sir.
So Anita Moorjani is a very powerful evidence, and there are many more evidences like that, but she is a poster girl for what I'm going to say, in the sense she has become world famous and a very renowned teacher in her own right. And what shot her to fame was her personal life experience of recovering from a cancer which had spread throughout her body, and she had multiple lipomas in different parts of the body. Most of her vital organs had been compromised by cancer. So it is absolutely end stage cancer, and actually she had died in the hospital. Doctors could not save her, what is called NDE, near death experience. But she goes on the other side after her death, and there she meets her dad who had passed away earlier, and a best friend who had passed away earlier, their souls. So these 2 souls meet her on the other side when when we pass on after death. And so realm of the dead souls, I mean. So there they meet, and many of our misconceptions about life that had produced the cancer, they get resolved, or rather dissolved, by the wisdom that these people share. These 2 souls share with her some very profound wisdom, which she is going to share in this talk, and that she integrated at the spirit level. No, we discussed theta level programming is very powerful, if you remember. Alpha, beta, gamma, theta. So obviously, when she is a soul, spirit on the other side, she is maybe not even theta, but she is in the gamma state. Gamma state is the state where very advanced meditators only can reach. So, and maybe there is some other thing which is beyond the understanding of modern science. So that I can't, very convincingly say what is the scientific fact behind that. But I mean, whether it is alpha, beta, gamma, delta, whatever it is, or it is something beyond that, because there may be things beyond these things also. But whatever it is, what she received, in that other realm, was received obviously at her soul level, very deep level, deepest possible level. So when she came back to her body, she knew that cancer cannot remain anymore in me. Why? Because her consciousness has changed drastically. And the beauty is that she now knows, even when she is coming back to the body, that this body will recover. Now, this is not possible for any medical treatment to claim that they can do it, right? But she knew in her soul, and then she comes back in the body, and then within next few weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, her body recovers completely, cancer vanishes completely, and doctors are very amazed. It happened in Hong Kong. It's very, very well documented case in a very, very famous Hong Kong hospital. So it cannot be contradicted at all. It's very much scientifically established case. Now science may tell it as a bizarre case or an outlier case, but the person goes on to become a very world famous personality because of Wayne Dyer, a very famous teacher, spiritual teacher, Wayne Dyer, if you know him. I used to give in my courses a book called Your Erroneous Zones. Sachit may remember that. So that Your Erroneous Zones writer's name is Wayne Dyer, and he is a very famous self-help genre author. He is no more. He died a few years ago. He noticed her case. She had started sharing her case on something called NDE, near-death experience research foundation on that website. And there is a forum there where people used to ask her questions, and she was answering these questions for 2-3 years. So when I noticed her from there, and then when I contacted a publisher called Hay House. Hay House is a very famous publication house, publishes spiritual books. So Hay House, maybe world's top spiritual publishing. I mean, publication house for spiritual books, world's top publishers. It was founded by, I think, Louis Hay. Louis Hay is a very famous spiritual teacher in her time. So getting published by Hay House is not such a small thing. It's a very, very rare thing. It's just like getting an article published in HBR, something like that. So when Dyer tells Hay House that this is a very fascinating case, you should publish this case. So then Hay House contacts this Anita Moorjani to write her story as a book. Then she wrote the book called Dying to Be Me, and this book became a bestseller, Dying to Be Me. So what she means is that she died in physical space, actually to realize that what produced that tremendous illness, and then she made the necessary amendments in her consciousness. And then when she comes back to the body with a new consciousness, the body recovers. So why Bruce Lipton cites it as a very powerful case validating his hypothesis is that it is not the genes or DNA that controls the body, it is the consciousness that controls the body. He says, no, the mind, the interpretation, the inner environment controls the body. Now, obviously, where does mind come from? Mind comes from consciousness. Like consciousness is basically how we interpret our life, isn't it? That is what is depicting a level of consciousness. So, and what is mind? Mind is what kind of thoughts and feelings we are generating from that level of consciousness. So as we evolve upwards in consciousness, our thoughts become more refined and more accurate, and they reflect reality more accurately. And as a result, our feelings also tend to become much positive in nature and much more beautiful in nature, and not so negative or sad or bitter. So that is what. So Anita Moorjani goes through a tremendous metamorphosis overnight, literally, just because of engaging with these two souls on the other side and what wisdom they transmit. Now in that realm, obviously what they will transmit will be transmitted in her very being, the core of her being, right? So she receives it in the core of her being, what we call the soul or the subtle body or whatever, at a much deeper level than the physical body. And it seems that from her case, it is that level understanding of life that manifests as our physical body and our mind, which is the tool through which we interpret our life. So all this becomes very clear through her dramatic case. And now there is no illness more difficult than cancer, and cancer of the type that she has got is absolutely the last stage. People die at that stage because there is multiple lipoma in all over the body. It is not one lipoma, it is multiple lipoma all over the body. Now how can a person recover from that? You can understand, right? It's not possible, right? No pathy on earth can treat that. Homeopathy, allopathy, Ayurveda, nothing can treat that. The only way she treated herself, or it could be a God's grace or whatever, is that she transformed her consciousness absolutely drastically. And what was the nature of her transformation? When she was living earlier in life, she shares that in this video. She was basically an introverted type of person, or a person who allowed other people to dominate her. And, she would not be able to express or assert her perspective. As a result, pent up frustration, feelings, all those, kind of accumulated in her as negativity and produced this cancer. So she could not love herself. That is what she says. Because if she had loved herself, she would not allow this to happen to her. So what she comes back with is tremendous self-love. And Sachit will know, in my happiness course, I always teach about the power of self-love. So this is another case which validates what I teach, which is, it is my personal experience also, that, in the sense that whatever I could become in my life, little bit, is because of my own self-love for myself. So in a way, for me also, it's a very powerful validation that actually I teach something correct to my students. That yes, it is very important to love yourself unconditionally, and it is not selfish to do so. Because generally people think that when you love yourself, it is being selfish, but it is not true. True self-love is the only way we can love others. So that Anita explains in this video. So be patient and watch the whole thing. And it's 1 hour 17 minutes long, and the last 25 minutes she will start explaining why the cancer happened and how it got healed. Okay, so which is the educational part, and initially she will share her case and her life story a little bit, and it's a very fascinating video, and then we'll discuss the implications for our life. Okay, obvious, I mean the implication is very obvious even now that consciousness is important, but little bit more detail we will see based upon what she says. So I'll share the video now. Just give me one moment. Here we go.
I feel really blessed to be here because if the doctors were right, I wouldn't be here. The last day of the 2nd, 2006. On that day, I went into a coma because I had end-stage cancer.
Is the sound audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Lymphoma, which had started 4 years prior. I had been diagnosed in 2002, in April of 2002, and it started with a lump on my neck, on the left side of my neck. And over the years, over the 4 years, it had progressed so that it had progressed and it had metastasized. So I had tumors. Some of them were the size of lemons from the base of my skull, all around my neck, under my arms, through my chest, all the way down to my abdomen. During that course of time, as the cancer progressed, what also started to happen was things like my muscles started to deteriorate, my body stopped absorbing nutrition. So by the time I was at end stages, I weighed about 83 pounds. My lungs had filled with fluid, so I had trouble breathing. If I would lie down, I would choke on my own fluid because my lungs were always filled with fluid. If I would walk, I would get out of breath every few paces and I would have to sit down. So I would spend most of my time in a wheelchair being wheeled around by other people. I was also connected to an oxygen tank. I had an oxygen mask on my face all the time. I hated going into hospitals because I found hospitals depressing. And I would always feel that I'd come out feeling even worse from hospitals. So I wanted to spend as much time at home as possible. So I would go in and out of hospitals for treatments, but I would spend all my time between treatments at home. So I was being cared for at home by my family. My mother was there caring for me, and my husband, who never left my side. He was really my biggest support. He was the person I really trusted more than anybody during that journey. And we also had a full-time nurse who would come in the morning and she would leave at night. So on this particular morning, on February the 2nd, 2006, I didn't wake up. I was at home and I didn't wake up. And my body started to swell up. And my husband got really worried. He thought, okay, this is it. These are my final hours. And so he called the doctor right away. The doctor said to rush me to the hospital. And there was my regular doctor, and my regular doctor had called the most senior oncologist of that hospital to come down. And when he took one look at me, he said to my doctor that this is it. These are her final hours. She's not going to come out of it. because her organs have now shut down. So my organs were finally shutting down one at a time, my kidneys, my liver, and so on. So they started connecting me to all these tubes in the hospital. They wheeled me into the intensive care unit, and they put in all these tubes just to keep me alive. There was a nutrition tube, something connected to my heart, and something for my breathing, and so on. And obviously all this time I was in a coma and couldn't see anything they were doing. But actually I could. Unbeknownst to everyone around me, I could see and feel and hear what everybody was doing. Everybody that was treating me around my body. I could feel all the tubes. I could see them putting tubes into my veins, and I could see they were having trouble finding veins. And there was one nurse saying, her veins have retracted. What are we going to do? There was another one that said, it's hopeless anyway. And I could feel that they knew that I was going to die anyway, and it was hopeless anyway. The doctors were frantically running around, and then I reached a point where I was choking, and I was aware that my physical body was choking. And one of the doctors was called in, and he removed the fluid from my lungs so that I could breathe a little bit easier. Anyway, during all this time, I could even see that my husband was by my side, holding my hand. But I felt absolutely amazing. I was not in pain anymore. And I became aware that I was actually expanding away from my body. It was not like I popped out of my body, but it was more like my consciousness, my soul, whatever you want to call it. I call it the real me. The real me started to expand, and I started to feel that I was something far greater than this physical body that was lying there on the hospital bed. And I could see my physical body, the whole body, lying there on the bed. And it looked so small and insignificant because I was continuing to expand and feel greater and bigger and more powerful. And for the first time in 4 years, there was no more pain. The pain was gone. I didn't feel that heavy breathlessness. And the best part was there was no more fear. There was no discomfort, but there was no fear at all. I had been so scared. I had been fighting and fighting and fighting to stay alive. I was fighting the cancer. And now the fight was gone. And I felt beautiful, amazing, magnificent. And then I felt what I describe as a feeling of unconditional love. But the words don't do it justice, because the feeling was something much, much more, much greater than a feeling of, like, we overuse the word love here in the physical world. We say we love our phones, our computers, our stuff, but no, this was something really, really much more powerful. It was like I didn't have to do anything to deserve it or be worthy of this love. It was like I was loved just because I existed. And it's the first time I ever felt that in my life. Like I was just loved. And I wasn't loved by a person. That's what was so unconditional about it. It wasn't one person loving me. I felt like the whole universe loved me. Like every soul, every essence, everything, every atom, everything in the whole universe just loved me. That's what it felt like. But it also felt like I loved everything. That's what was so universal about it. It wasn't like I was just receiving love. It was like I was even feeling it for everyone and everything. It was like I had entered into like a state of clarity. And then now time is very different in that realm. So I'm trying to put everything into a sequence. But it doesn't happen in a sequence in that realm, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. It's like we process time as linear over here. We recall things and we put them into a linear sequence. But in that realm, it felt like all of time was happening simultaneously, all at once. It was like I had 360-degree peripheral vision. So I could see, hear, and feel everything at once, but not just what was happening in that hospital room. And I was in a hospital in Hong Kong, by the way. I could see, hear, and feel things that were happening way beyond the hospital room, way beyond this life. It was more like wherever I put my awareness, there I was. So I then became aware of my father. My father had passed away 10 years prior to me having this experience. And there he was. I felt he was there to greet me. It felt as though my father wasn't the only person that was there, but he was the first person I recognized. And it wasn't his physical body. It was more like a pure consciousness or his essence or his soul. There were other beings around, but I didn't recognize them from this life. My father and I, when I was growing up, my father and I had a very turbulent relationship because my parents are Indian, they're Hindus, and I grew up in Hong Kong, which is a predominantly Chinese city where the predominant religion is Buddhism. And my parents, though, they put me into a British school so that I would learn to speak English because they wanted me to be able to speak fluent English. And the British school was predominantly a Christian school, a Catholic school, actually. So I had all these conflicting views on religion. There was Buddhism, there was Hinduism, there was Catholicism, and so on. But anyway, as I grew older, so I would always challenge my parents about their religion because I would say that how can any religion be one true religion, because there is many religions here in this country, in this town we live in, as there are nationalities of people. So anyways, as I got older, my parents wanted me to have an arranged marriage, which I didn't want to have. And I would say that, but my British friends don't have to have arranged marriages. Why do I? But in our culture, apparently, it's the best thing that a parent can do for their daughter is to find a good husband, a suitable husband for their daughter. So finally, I gave in, and my parents arranged a marriage for me. But 2 days before the wedding, I ran away, which caused a lot of problems in my community. I was ostracized from my community. And I brought a lot of shame to my family and the family of my then fiance, of the man I was supposed to marry. And my parents were told by everybody in their community that no man or boy or whatever would marry me now that I had done this. No parents would ever let their son come near me because of what I had done. So my parents had to carry that shame, and I always carried that guilt that I had let them down. My father passed away before I married my husband Danny, a beautiful man who happens to also be Indian. And when he told his parents that he wanted to marry me, the first thing his parents said, "That's the woman that has a mind of her own." Which in our culture is not necessarily a good thing. So anyway, I had felt that I had always disappointed my father. I'd never been good enough. I'd never, ever met his expectations. I'd let him down. I disappointed him. I brought him shame. I brought shame in our culture. And he wasn't even there for my wedding. When I encountered my father in the other realm, however, all I felt from him and for him was pure, unconditional love. Nothing more, nothing less. There was no judgment. My feelings of guilt had gone when I just felt that pure, unconditional love. And I understood that he had been with me throughout my illness. He had been with me even at my wedding to Danny. He had been with my whole family all this time. And I realized that there was nothing to forgive. Now, the way we communicate in the other realm is not the same as we communicate over here. Because when we leave our physical bodies, we don't have the same, we don't have vocal cords. We leave behind our physical bodies, our vocal cords. So when we communicate, it's like from one pure consciousness to another. And it's like our pure consciousness just merges. And I knew everything that my father wanted me to know. There's no room for miscommunication because it's just two pure consciousness just merging together. And like over here, we learn language, we learn to communicate so that we can express our feelings. But have you noticed that most of us actually use communication to hide our feelings? In the other realm, you can't hide behind anything. It's all known. It's all transparent. Because what I learned was that when we cross over, we don't just leave behind our physical bodies. We leave behind our culture, our race, our gender, our religion, our beliefs, and all the layers and layers of beliefs and things that we've accumulated over this lifetime. We leave it all behind. Death transcends all of that. So if we leave all these things behind, what crosses over? What crosses over is our pure awareness, our pure consciousness. And even without all those things, what crosses over isn't something that's less or smaller. It's actually something that's far, far greater. It's far bigger. What crosses over is so big and so magnificent and so pure that all those other things, our gender, our culture, our beliefs, our religion, our race, all these are just baggage and labels and boxes that limit who we are. They don't add to who we are. They actually limit who we truly are. That's what I learned. And that's when I realized that my father, when he had crossed over, he had lost all his cultural beliefs. And so all he felt for me was pure, unconditional love. And so I know now that when we lose people, when they die, even if we haven't had a chance to say sorry for something we've done, even if we lose them and we didn't have a good relationship while we were alive, I know that in death, all they feel for us is pure, unconditional love, because there is clarity and there is an understanding for why everything that happened. I had felt guilty about running away from the arranged marriage. I had felt really guilty, and I had held that with me for all the years until I had my NDE. But in the NDE, in the clarity, I realized that what I had done was the best thing that I could do. It was the perfect thing because it was even what that family needed to be done to them. It was what my culture needed as well, so that people could understand more about what arranged marriages do to us. And it also helped a lot of other women without me even realizing it. I only saw it when I was in that near-death experience state, how everything we do is part of this greater tapestry. And when you can see the whole picture, it's just so perfect. And so that's why there's no judgment for things that we seemingly do wrong. I understood that even the worst criminals, they do what they do out of fear and out of a lack of love. So when we cross over, it's not that we get punished, because you can't solve problems or crime or violence with even more violence, The only cure, the only thing that heals it is love. And that's when I learned that there was absolutely no judgment. I also encountered the essence of my best friend while I was in the other realm. My best friend had died 2 years prior, and she had cancer as well. And when she died, I had been so fearful of the cancer that was within me that I wasn't able to go see her. In her last few weeks, I wouldn't even go to the hospital to see her because she had deteriorated so badly that it was just too much for me to see what she was going through, because I believed that that's what was in store for me because my own cancer was progressing. So when I got the phone call from her sister that she had died, I was devastated, and I felt really guilty that I had not been with her. Again, when I met my best friend in the other realm, all I got from her was pure, unconditional love. She completely understood everything without any explanation whatsoever. I was also aware of my brother, who is alive in this physical life. Now, my brother was living in India at the time that this had happened. And my brother was flying over to come and see me in Hong Kong as soon as he heard that I was in a coma. So he only heard after I went into the coma. As soon as he heard, he was frantically trying to get on a plane to come and see me in Hong Kong. I was aware that he was on the plane. I actually saw him on the plane, and I was aware that I had to stay alive at least until he got to see me, because I knew he'd be distraught if he missed me. So I was aware of all these things happening, and I also became aware of other lifetimes that I've had with my brother, other lifetimes that I've had with my husband, Danny. I was aware that the whole time he was sitting there by my bedside, he didn't leave during the whole time. And I was aware that his purpose and mine was actually linked in this life. But at the same time, I felt that if I died, it's still okay, because we would still get another chance at another time, another lifetime. I reached a point where I realized that I couldn't go any further if I wanted to still turn back. But no part of me wanted to turn back. It was a point where I felt I had the choice of coming back into my physical body or going onward into death. But that state was so beautiful that no part of me wanted to come back into my physical body. My body was dying, my body was suffering, my family was suffering, taking care of me, so no part of me really wanted to come back. But then my father started to tell me that I needed to go back because it wasn't my time. I needed to go back because there were some gifts that I still had on this side, which I had not yet experienced. It was like he was telling me that you've suffered and now there are some gifts waiting for you. And then it was like I saw a vision of what my life would be if I chose to come back. And I saw what the life of my family would be if I chose not to come back. And I saw that if I didn't come back, I actually saw that, I even saw the medical records that my family would be presented, which would say that death due to organ failure from end-stage lymphoma. And I also saw that my husband would not live very long because our purposes were linked. He would follow maybe in 6 months or a year or so after that. But I saw that if I chose to go back into life, that I saw myself actually speaking to people, hundreds, maybe thousands of people. But I had no idea what I would be speaking to them about or how it would happen. But I actually saw that. I was supposed to go back and speak to people. And I knew, though, that if I went back, I wouldn't have to figure it out. I wouldn't have to figure out what I'm talking to them about or how it would happen. But there was something waiting for me. There was a purpose. and I had to go back to fulfill this purpose. But in that moment, I was still reluctant because I thought my body is dying of cancer. And then it felt almost as though in the next instant, I felt this sort of state of clarity where I understood how I had got cancer. I understood how every thought, every decision, every choice I had made in my life, through every moment of time of my life up to that point, had led me to being in that hospital bed in that moment, dying from end-stage cancer. And I understood that now that I knew this truth, and now that I knew the truth of who I truly am and who we truly are, I understood that we are actually amazing, magnificent, powerful beings, more so than we're ever told or taught. I knew that now that I knew this, if I chose to go back into my physical body, my body would heal very, very quickly. And I felt as though it was in that moment that my father said to me, now that you know the truth, go back and live your life fearlessly. And it was in those moments that I started to wake up from the coma. And as I woke up from the coma, I was in the hospital room, and I looked around and my family were there, and they were so shocked to see that I was opening my eyes. I'd been in the coma for about a day and a half, about 36 hours. And my brother was there. He just got off the plane. My husband was there. My mother was there. And they were excited that I'd come out of the coma. And I was very, very groggy. It was like I had one foot in each side. And I kept saying, Dad is here. Dad's here with us. Dad told me to come back. Dad said I was going to be okay. And so they realized that I was delirious, that, and they called the doctor to come in. And this was the doctor that had seen me after I had come into the hospital in the coma. He had never seen me before that. I had never seen him before that. And when he walked in the room, I called him by his name. I said, good afternoon, Dr. Chan. And he looked really surprised. He said, how did you know my name? I said, you're the doctor that was here when I came into the hospital yesterday. He said, you came in a coma. And how would you possibly know my name? And I said, but you were the one that was treating me. You took the fluid out of my lungs when I was choking. And he said, you could not have seen that. Anyway, he was really surprised, but he tried to dismiss it. And he told my family, look, she's still very weak. She's still very delirious. She's still very sick. She may have just woken up, come out of it for a few minutes, but she's not out of danger yet. So then after he left the room, I said to my husband, why was he so surprised that I recognized him? Isn't he the one that said to you that I won't make it through the night, that these are my final hours? And my husband said, how did you hear that? He didn't say that here in the room. He said that down the hallway at the nurse's station. I said, really? I know I saw him and heard him say that. I was so groggy that I was confused as to what I had seen here and what I had seen in the other side, and I just started talking. And I was so weak and so sick. I didn't mention that even my muscles had deteriorated so much, and I was so weak that I wasn't even able to lift my head up. My head was always down like this, and I had these big open skin lesions, which were big wounds in my neck and under my arm where toxins were coming out of my skin. So I had these big bandages. So I still looked really, really sick. But by about 24 hours later, it started to sink in what had happened, but I didn't quite understand it. All I knew was that I had this purpose. I had come back for a reason, and that my dad had sent me back, and I felt euphoric So I wanted to sit up. I wanted to pull out the food tube. I wanted to start eating proper food and start being alive again. And I was telling my family, I'm going to be okay. And it wasn't that I knew my body was going to heal. It was more like I knew I was already healed, but my body just had to catch up. My understanding of time had changed, and my understanding of consciousness and illness, everything had changed. And I was so euphoric, even though I was really weak, and I wanted to sit up, and I wanted to listen to music. For some reason, I wanted to listen to Dancing Queen over and over. I don't know why. It just reflected the mood. I was so euphoric. And it was like I just had this reason to be here and to experience life again. And within 4 days, they found that my tumors had shrunk 70%. And I no longer needed the oxygen tubes. I no longer needed the food tube. And so they moved me to a regular room out of the ICU. And actually what the doctor said was that I was starting to become a disruption in the ICU. So they moved me to a regular room, and they continued to take tests to find the cancer, which drastically just started to reduce and disappear. And I remember one day, like literally 3 weeks after I had come out of the coma, and I was getting stronger, and I was starting to get out of bed, I was starting to walk, I had to build up strength in my muscles, and the skin lesions were healing, and they had said they might need to do a skin graft they would have to do surgery for the skin lesions because they said my body was not strong enough to heal them. But even the skin lesions started to heal on their own. So I remember one day, 3 weeks after I had come out of the coma, the doctors came into my hospital room. 3 doctors came in, and they said to my family, we have a problem. So my brother said, what's the problem? And everybody looked a little bit worried. And so one of them spoke up and said, we can't find the cancer. So my brother said, how is that a problem? And this other doctor said, if we can't find the cancer, we don't know how to treat it. So I said, maybe you don't have to treat it if you can't find it. And then the third doctor said, no, it's not possible. Cancer doesn't just disappear like that, but we're not going to give up till we find it. Now, I don't say this to slander doctors because I have had a lot of support from doctors. More than doctors, I've had a lot of support from nurses. All of them are beautiful people. They go into healing and working with sick people for the purpose of helping and healing. So I don't say this for that reason, but more because I have started to talk more with doctors and medical people because I want them to start to change the way they look at illness. It's more that than anything. So anyway, at the end of 5 weeks, I was strong enough and they let me go home and live my life cancer-free. So here's where the hard part starts. It's starting life over again. But before I go into that part, what I'd like to do is I'd like to share some photos of my journey if you'd like to see some. And also, those are my parents. What I want to say though, before we get into the photos, I didn't have any photos taken of when I was at my absolute worst. By the time I needed a wheelchair and I was on an oxygen tank, I refused to see people. I refused to have pictures taken. I had no idea I was going to come back again. So these are my parents, and we'll go to the next photo. That's my father, who I encountered in the other realm. That's my best friend. She's the one on my left, which is your right, in the blue t-shirt, and myself. We grew up together. We were best friends our whole lives, and she died 2 years before I had the near-death experience. And that's my husband and I when we got married, Danny and myself, 20 years ago. That was when I started to get ill, when it started to show. I would never be far away from my bed. Okay, so that was when I was really ill, but still, this was not my worst, but I wouldn't have any photos taken after this. So, and here you can see that on my neck, I had these open skin lesions, which were covered in bandages myself with my dog. Oh, that's Cosmo, my dog. But he's not alive anymore. He passed away. He was 14. He passed away 4 years ago. And one of the reasons I hated being in hospital was because I missed my dog so much. Now, yes. So now I wanted to show you the next one. This is my a hospital report from the 2nd of February. That was the day I entered hospital. And you can see, and I'm sorry I blacked out some of the things like the doctor's names and information like that. But you can see that whole list. That list is a list of where all the tumors were in my body. And so it shows you where there were tumors, the axilla and so on. That means under the arms and the chest and the lungs and the neck. It shows that there was fluid in my lungs and so on and on. There's the whole extensive list there. And then the next one, this is the one on the day that they came into my room to say that they have a problem. And the date on this is the 27th of February. So between the 2nd and the 27th. And this is the one where it says that they can find no evidence of lymphoma. So I just wanted to share just those 2 pages. And of course, at that time, I had no idea that I was going to come out of it. And so I have no photos of me in the hospital or with the tubes or anything like that. So when I had to go home and live my life cancer-free, that is when the challenge really started. Because I was no longer the person that I was before. And I know many of you here have had near-death experiences, so you know what I'm talking about. I was not that same person. I was not the same person that had the cancer. The cancer changed me. And I was not the same person that went into the hospital and had the NDE. I was a different person now, afterwards. And I had to integrate this into my life. And that was so challenging. I didn't know what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I like to use metaphors to explain what it feels like. So if I can use a metaphor of, if you imagine that you were born blind, and imagine that you have never, ever had sight in your life. And you can even try it now. Just close your eyes and imagine it. But imagine your entire life was like this, and you've never had sight. So imagine that if somebody tells you that the sky is above you, how do you even understand it? What does it mean? What is the sky? You can't touch it. You can't taste it. You can't feel it. How do you describe to someone who's never seen the sky what it is? How do you tell them it's blue? How can something be both sky and blue, but you can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't hear it? And then imagine if someone just tries to explain to you what colors are, or they tell you that the back of this room is about 50 feet away, and you think, how do you know? Until I walk it, I don't know the distance. So you don't know what perception is. If you've never had sight, your imagination is different as well, because your frame of reference is different. It's different from a sighted person. And so now, if you open your eyes and you look around and you see, look at the colors that you would not have been able to see if you were blind. Look at Look at the depth of field, the perceptions, the things that you would not have been able to understand if a sighted person was trying to explain it to you. Imagine being a blind person who was born blind and going into an elevator of a building. You go in and you come out on a different floor. How do you explain to someone who can't see what a building is? How do you explain that there are different levels, it's different heights, and that you've come out on a different floor? It can be very, very difficult. Now imagine that you were born blind and then one day you get sight. For one day you get sight and suddenly everything makes sense. The whole world makes sense. Now you understand how something can be sky and it can be blue at the same time, because you now understand what blue means and what sky means. You understand how something can be wooden and it can be a table and it can be brown at the same time. You start to understand. You understand what distance means. It all makes sense. So even if you go back to being blind, it all makes sense. You navigate differently because you understand the world differently. But imagine if you've had sight for one day and you go back to being blind, but you live in a world where everybody else has been born blind. And now you have to explain to them what you experienced. And those of you that have had NDEs, you'll understand what I'm talking about. And I can see your heads nodding. How many of you here have had NDEs? You get it, don't you? Thank you. It's almost impossible to explain to someone who's not seen it. So this is why sometimes I try to explain to people that just because you can't see it, hear it, feel it, touch it, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Just because you don't have that perception, that ability to be aware of it, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. We were born with this awareness. We were born knowing more or seeing more or being aware of more than we are as we grow up, because we have to try and fit in. And what I realized when I came back from my experience was that everybody was different from me. I was different, actually, not they. I was different. I perceived the world differently. I understood the world differently. But I didn't have the words or the tools to explain to them, because to me now, the world seemed completely upside down. I didn't understand why we had made the world the way it is today. There was so much I didn't understand. I couldn't watch TV anymore because I can't see people being killed. I didn't understand why we teach different religions to different people, because that only fosters separation. But actually, when we die, we're all part of the same consciousness. We're all like different fingers on the same hand. Imagine if we collaborated instead of competed, we'd have a much better world. I couldn't understand why we teach kids to compete instead of collaborate. I couldn't understand why we train armies to go and kill other people. The whole world did not make sense to me. I use another metaphor to explain how I see the world or how I see the afterlife. I use a metaphor of a warehouse. So if you can imagine, imagine that you're in a dark warehouse where the lights are off and it's pitch black. It's absolutely pitch black. And the lights have never been on, so you've always been in this dark warehouse. And all you have to navigate through this warehouse is one little flashlight to light your way. And all you can see in this warehouse is what this one little flashlight shines its beam on. Although you have control as to where to shine it, you can shine it there or there or there, but you shine it to light your path. And so even though that you've seen various different things, you haven't seen everything because your beam is so limited. It's so small and it's so limited, and all you see is just what your beam is shining on. Now imagine one day the lights go on. And imagine when the lights go on, you realize that you are in this huge warehouse. It is so huge that you can't see the ends. You can't see where the walls are, but it's lined with shelves, rows and rows and rows of shelves, just shelves like bookshelves. And the ceilings are so high you can't see them. So the bookshelves just go on and on. And on these bookshelves, there are all kinds of things. And I really mean every kind of thing on the shelf. And you have not seen most of these things because your flashlight was only shining on one thing at a time here and there randomly. So you may have seen 1% of the things on the shelves, 99% of the things you've never seen. And there are beautiful things and ugly things and scary things and not so scary things and colorful things and dull things, all existing simultaneously, side by side. There are scary and not so scary things existing simultaneously, side by side. Positive things and negative things existing simultaneously. All of them existing together. Now imagine that when the lights of the warehouse go off and you're back to one flashlight, even though you can still only see one thing at a time, you can only see what your flashlight is shining on, you're now aware that that's not the only thing that exists. Just because it's the only thing that your beam can shine on doesn't mean it's the only thing that exists. There are so many possibilities that exist simultaneously. There are so many things that your beam, the beam of your flashlight, can be shining on, but it just happens to be shining on that right now. The flashlight is an analogy of your awareness. Your awareness is only focused on one thing, on one point of time at a time. And we believe that what we see, hear, feel in this moment is what the world is like. But it isn't. It's just one little tiny point of that huge warehouse where every possibility, every probability exists at the same time. You can be focusing on something negative, but something positive can be right next to it. But your flashlight happens to be focusing on the negative. And let me give you an example. Those of you who've heard me speak before have done this, but if you haven't, play along with me. I want you to look around the room and find everything in the room that is any shade of like a orangish, pink, red, any shade in that family. Just look around and find all the things that are anywhere near orange or pink or red, and commit them to your memory, because I'm going to test you. So look around, as many as you can, commit them to your memory. People's clothes, things in the room, bags, whatever. As many. Okay, so face the front. Thank you. Face the front, no cheating. Face the front now and close your eyes. Close your eyes. Now I want you to recollect as many things in the room that are blue. Having trouble? Okay, open your eyes and look around as to how many blue things you missed. Quite a bunch. So, have you noticed when you buy a new car, you suddenly notice a lot of people driving the same car? They were always there, but you just never saw them before. So that the blue existed right under your nose, but you missed it because you were so focused on the orange. We do this all the time. We focus on bad news. We focus on things that scare us. We do this all the time. Have you noticed recently, in the last few years, how much focus there is on cancer awareness? Have you noticed all the cancer campaigns and all the billions of dollars we spend on research on cancer and all the adverts on cancer? Can you imagine if we put the same amount of energy, made the same campaigns, spent the same amount of money, put the same amount of awareness on well-being awareness instead? What a different world we'd have. And this is what I mean about the world feeling completely upside down and the wrong way around. I felt that we were trying to create more peace by grooming more armies. We were trying to create more health by focusing more on illness. And we do this in everything we do. And then we wonder, how did we create such a messed up world? Well, this is why. And so I found it really, really difficult to integrate back into life and to talk to people. And I found that I started to become more reclusive. I started to get a little bit more depressed. Then Danny, my husband, suggested to me that I should write about what I experienced. So I just started writing, and I wrote everything that I've shared with you. I just wrote it and wrote it and wrote it. And I was living in Hong Kong. There was no support group. There's nowhere for me to go to talk about these things. And so my brother, he was online, he was in India and he was surfing the internet. And he came across a website called NDERF, and I believe Jeffrey Long is somewhere here in the audience. And so I'm sure a lot of you have heard of NDERF, Near-Death Experience Research Foundation. And so my brother came across that website and sent me the link. So this was in August of 2006. I had come out of hospital in March of 2006. And my brother sent me the link and said, there are people on this website that have had similar experiences. So I started to read a few and I thought, wow, this is amazing. There's people who will understand me. There's people who I get. And then there was a button to click. If you've had your own experience, would you like to share it? Click here if you would. So I clicked that on the website, and then there was a form and I started filling it in. And there was a part where it said that you share your story here. So I had already been writing my story. And so I just copied and pasted the whole thing into the form and hit submit. And then what appeared on my screen, it said something like, please allow 3 weeks for someone to contact you as to when it will be published on our website. And I was in Hong Kong, it was evening, and I went to bed. And the next morning I woke up and there was an email from Dr. Jeffrey Long. And he said something like, greetings, your near-death experience is extremely interesting. And then he asked me a few questions about the medical side behind it and what had happened. And then he published my story on the site. But what happened subsequently is people started discussing it on the NDERF forum. So Dr. Jeff wrote to me and said, there are people who are discussing it on the forum and they're asking questions. Would you like to chime in? Now, I've found that when I started writing on that forum, that was like my therapy, because people would ask me questions and I had the opportunity to talk about it freely in a safe place that talked about these things. So I would talk about it or write about it, and I would write and write and write. Now, on this forum, I was just known as Anita M. And I kept it that way. I didn't, so I started trying to live a life here in the physical. I started trying to figure out maybe some kind of freelance work. I couldn't go back to work in a normal job because I didn't understand anymore because my life had changed so much. My life was too valuable to me to go to a job I hated, to earn money, to pay bills so that I could go to a job I hated. I could not understand that life anymore. So I worked freelance, but I didn't tell anybody in the area where I worked in. I started doing something called cultural training, where I worked with people of different companies who had come to Hong Kong, people from other countries who'd come to Hong Kong to work, and I helped them to integrate into Chinese culture. And I never spoke about my NDE to them, to my clients, the people I worked with, or anybody. So I had this whole other life where I'd be anxious to go back home in the evening and see what questions were there, because I was on a different time zone. I was in Hong Kong, and when I slept, the people in the US were awake, and they were all reading what I'd written, and they would ask their questions. And then I would wake up the next day, and then I would look at the questions, and I would start answering them. And this went on for about 3 years, and it was really good for me. It was very therapeutic. It helped me to understand and process, and it was as good as having some kind of like a weekly support group or something. It was really, really therapeutic. How many of you were on the NDERF forum? Anybody? Anyone remember a guy named Marine Boy? Yeah, he was the one that came across the most skeptical. No matter what I wrote, it came across like he was slandering it, like he was saying, almost like, I don't believe you. And he would get me to explain it further and further. And after about 3 years, I actually stopped writing. And I have to say it was because I was tired of Marine Boy. I thought, oh my God, if I can't convince him by now, forget this. I'm giving up. So anyway, subsequently, what actually happened was that I didn't realize this, but my story was actually going viral. And it was picked up by a lot of people. I started getting contacted by people who were writing to Jody Long and asking them to forward their email to me. And I was getting contacted by oncologists who wanted to look at my medical records and verify them, which I did. I shared it with them, and it was verified by various oncologists. One of the things one of the oncologists said was he couldn't understand where did all the cancer cells go, because my organs were shut down. I had billions of cancer cells in my body, and he couldn't understand where did they all go in 3 weeks' time. So there were things they couldn't explain. And when people ask me, doctors, scientists, they ask me, like, so what do you think happened? And I said, my consciousness changed, and so my body reflected it. And they said, no, but that's not a medical answer. And I said, but I'm not a medical doctor. I leave it to you guys to figure that out. As I continued, I'd stopped writing on the forum. I completely stopped. And then one day, a friend of mine who was opening a healing center, she said to me, I would like you to come and share your story at my healing center. I'm doing the grand opening, and there's going to be 50 or 60 people. I'd like you to come and share your story. And I said, oh, I don't know if I do this, and these people are going to want me to heal them from cancer. I was a little bit scared. And she said, no, it's going to be good for them. The story itself is going to be really encouraging and healing. So I went along, and there were 50 or 60 people, and I shared my story that night. It was 2011. It was March 15th, 2011. I shared my story, and as I was sharing my story, actually speaking it to a group of people, something changed within me. I thought, it feels like this is the purpose. This is what I saw myself speaking about. This is what I wrote about it even on Dr. Jeffrey Long's site. When I wrote it in 2006, I even wrote that I saw myself speaking to a lot of people, but I didn't have to figure out how to do it or how it would happen. And something shifted. I thought, this is it. This is what I saw myself doing. This is what I saw myself speaking. And then when I finished speaking, people were coming up to me and they were saying, you know, your story really touched me. It helped me. It's helping me with my healing journey. And I said, and I was thinking internally, forget about it touching and shifting you. It touched and shifted me just sharing it. So I felt they had kind of healed me. So I went to bed that night feeling really different. I felt, wow, I found my purpose. The next morning, I woke up and there was an email in my mailbox, and the next morning happened to be my birthday. So on my birthday, there was an email in my email box that said, that was from Hay House Publishers, saying, Wayne Dyer has read your story on the internet and was very moved by it and has been trying to track you down because he has told us, Hay House, to track you down and so that you can write a book, which we would be happy to publish, and Wayne Dyer would like to write the foreword. I know. I mean, who gets that? Now, here's what's really weird was that I got that letter the moment I was ready for it. I found out later that they were trying to track me down for 5 months. For 5 months. He was talking about me on the radio, hoping that somebody would listen in, because my last name was not on that story. It didn't say Anita Moorjani. It just said Anita M. And from some clues, like it being in Hong Kong and so on, he got the publishers to track me down. So it took them 5 months. And this is what I mean about time not being linear. This was all happening in the background, but only when I was ready did the letter arrive in my email box the next day. So I've learned that time is not linear in this realm. We don't have to pursue things and chase things and go from step 1 to 9 to get to step 10. We just have to be ready to let step 10 into our lives. When we are ready, when we are clear, when we know our purpose, it comes to us. Now this afternoon, I'm actually going to be holding a workshop where I will also be taking questions, but I'll also be talking a lot more about how to embrace a lot of the things that I've learned and how to embrace it and how to actually apply it in our lives. So that'll be in the workshop. I think that's at 4:30. So I'll get into all that a lot more detail in the afternoon. But just to cover just a few more points over here before we finish, is that I said to you earlier that I understood why I got the cancer. I understood how it was that every choice and every decision in my life caused me to be in that hospital bed, dying in that moment. I realized when I was in the other realm that every choice I had made in my life, I had made from a place of fear. I realized that I had spent a lifetime not loving myself. I had spent a lifetime forsaking myself, making myself small, treating myself like a doormat. When I was in that realm, I realized that the biggest lesson was that I had to love myself like my life depends on it. Because it does. Our lives depend on us loving ourselves. And that was the biggest lesson I learned, that I had to love myself like my life depends on it. I had never known that before. I had grown up believing that it was selfish to love myself. And so I had always put myself down and put myself last and treated myself like a doormat and allowed other people to treat me like a doormat, because other people can't treat you in any way that you don't treat yourself. You have to allow it first. How many of you grew up believing that it's selfish to love yourself? quite a few. And you may know differently now because you're all enlightened now. You've all read the books and had your NDEs and you're all enlightened now. But we don't teach that to kids at school. We never learned that at school, that how important it is to love ourselves. Because when I was in that realm, I realized that God is not a being that is separate from me. God is within me. God is within you. God is the infinite universe, the infinite light that shines out from behind your eyes. And when I realized that I am an expression of God, and a piece of God, an expression, a facet of God that is expressing itself through me, how can I not love me? How can I not love you? How can you not love you? Because to not love yourself means to deny the part of God that has chosen to express itself as you and through you. That's what we deny when we don't love ourselves. And only when we love ourselves and see God within ourselves are we truly able to see God within other people. Because if we try to be unconditionally loving to other people without being unconditionally loving to ourselves, it's really hard work. It drains you. It really does. But when we're unconditionally loving towards ourselves and when we realize who we truly are as expressions of God, then it becomes easy, really easy. Because all we're doing is we are being the love that we are. We're being the love that we came here to be. I realized that the reason that I had lost my way, and I suspect it's true for many of us, I realized that we're born knowing who we are. Because one of the biggest burning questions that I came back with was that, why did I have to die to find this out? What if I didn't come back? What a waste of a life to find this out after we die. And I realized that we are actually born knowing this. We're born knowing the love that we are. We're born knowing that we are an expression of God, a facet of God here to express ourselves. We're born knowing that life happens through us, not to us. We're not victims of life's situation. We're here to experience life happening through us. We're born knowing this. But we forget. We forget a lot of it is due to our conditioning, to our cultures, to our education, and so on. And so slowly it starts to erode. And we forget, and then we become depressed, and then we have midlife crises, and so on. But every single one of us is already spiritual. We're born spiritual. We don't need to work at being more spiritual. We just need to remember who we are and be ourselves. And one of the ways in which we forget as we grow up is by learning fear. Fear is the biggest thing that moves us away from love, because every choice we make is actually made either out of fear or out of love. I've found that you can't do both. You can't have both at the same time, just like that flashlight, just like being focused on the red or the blue. You're focusing on either one or the other. You're focusing on either fear or love. And I noticed that when I was growing up, I always made my choices out of fear of the consequences. I would choose a job because I was afraid of not getting ahead and so on. Even at school, we're encouraged to choose the subjects that get us the best jobs, the fear of not getting the best jobs. We're not choosing the subjects that we're passionate about, that we love to do. And so we create a life built on fear, not built on love. That's why we get burnt out and depressed. When I had cancer, when I was diagnosed, I was so fearful. I was so fearful of the cancer. And what did I do? I researched everything on the internet. I started to eat healthy, but the thing is, I became obsessive about it. Fear makes us obsessive. And so I was so obsessive that I would order every supplement that was for cancer, that was an antioxidant. I would research every new product, and I would read about how everything causes cancer, everything from pesticides to plastic to microwave to sunshine and so on and on and on. And now I'm not saying not to be aware of things that are happening in the planet. I'm not saying not to be healthy. By all means, be healthy. But I did it out of fear, not out of love. Today, I still choose healthy foods. Whenever I'm at home, I eat healthy, and sometimes it's harder when I'm traveling. But I do it because I love myself. I do it because I love my life. I do it because I want to live long. I don't do it because I fear cancer or I fear death. I hate words like remission. I would remove them from the dictionary if I could, because it keeps people in the fear of cancer for 5 years. I usually tell people, as soon as you're cancer-free, tell yourself, I'm done with cancer. Now go live your life fearlessly. Go and find out what your passion is. Just be yourself, love yourself, be yourself, and just go and find your joy. I've realized that one of the most important things in life is to find your joy and do what you love, because life is just for living and for laughing, and not a lot more. Really, not a lot more than that. When I was just starting to come out, when I had come out of the coma, it was about a week, maybe 10 days after I had come out of the coma. And I was starting to gain my strength. And one of the nurses, she came into my room and she said to me that you've really got to start using your legs and start gaining some strength. And I'm going to take you out of the bed and get you to walk around the room a little bit. So she helped me out of the bed, and we started to walk around the room, and I was getting my strength back in my legs. So I was holding on to the nurse with one arm, and with the other arm, I was holding onto the IV stand, because I still had the tubes going in. And so I was walking around the room, and then I said to her, I'd like to go see myself in the mirror in the bathroom. I haven't seen myself for ages. So she led me to the bathroom, and I looked in the mirror, and I was horrified by what I saw, because I hadn't looked in the mirror for weeks and weeks. And what I saw was somebody, I was really, really skinny, skin and bones. The hair had come out of my head in clumps, and my cheeks were completely sunken in. It looked like my eyes were popping out of my head because my cheeks were so sunk in. And I had these big bandages around my neck because of this open skin lesions. And I just looked at myself, and I told the nurse to leave me for a couple of minutes, and I just started crying. And I was crying because I felt that I had done this to myself. I wasn't crying because I had lost my looks or anything. I was crying because I really felt that I had done it to myself. Not because I thought it was my fault I had cancer. Anybody that has cancer, I don't think it's your fault. I don't think anyone did it deliberately. But I felt I had done it to myself because I had spent my whole life just forsaking myself, treating myself badly, criticizing myself, judging myself, putting myself down, making myself small. And I'd spent a lifetime of doing that. And I realized that that is what had drained me to the point that I got cancer. And so I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked at my face, And I just put my hand up on the mirror. And I said to myself that day that I will never, ever let you down. I will never treat you like a doormat. I will never, ever judge you. I will never criticize you, even if you fail, even if everybody else does, even if everyone else judges you. I will never do that to you. I will treat myself as my own best friend. And from that day, I've stuck to that commitment. And this is what I invite all of you to do. And this is what I've realized was my biggest lesson from having that near-death experience. A lot of people write to me and they say things like, if we love ourselves, doesn't that make us really high maintenance? And doesn't that make us only want to go shopping and go to the spa and things like that? And somebody actually said, oh, I must really love myself because I'm constantly doing my hair and my nails and going to the spa, but my life's still not working for me. By all means, go shopping, go to the spa, eat chocolate, do all that. That's fine. But doing that doesn't mean you love yourself. I mean, I have a couple of those vices too. I love shopping. I love chocolate. But doing those things doesn't mean you love yourself. Loving yourself really means being your best friend, even when you've lost everything. It really means that even if you failed, even if you're completely downtrodden, even if you're being criticized by everyone else, it's the commitment that you will stick by you, that you will still always be your own best friend. That's what I've learned. I told you that Wayne Dyer discovered my story, and he sadly passed away just this last week, which was very sad for me because he did launch my first book. He had me on his TV show, on his public television TV show. We have done numerous, over the last 3-4 years, we have done so many speaking events together. He was the one that pulled me on stage the first time in front of 3,000 people. After that little talk I did in front of 60 people, it was several months later. The next day, I'd got this email, and then it was, and then he contacted me, and he flew me to Pasadena, and he pulled me up on stage, and there were 3,000 people in the audience, and he said to me, "Are you scared?" And I said, "Of course I'm scared. I've never spoken in front of 3,000 people before." And he said, "Why would you be scared? You've been dead and back. What's there to fear?" And I said, public speaking is actually scarier than dying. Dying's easy. But it was after speaking with him as well, I started to realize this is what I was meant to do. And so, and so I started to tour, and I started to speak. And it's funny because I had written back in 2006 on Jeffrey Long's website that I saw this vision. And sure enough, I realized all I had to do was just love myself, be myself, and I wouldn't have to figure it out. Because if I had to figure out how to get from where I was then to where I am now, I wouldn't be able to do it. I'm not that smart. I've realized that it's actually a lot simpler than that. And all we have to do is be ourselves and live our lives fearlessly. And on that note, I'd like to bring this speech to an end. So I invite you all to live your lives fearlessly. And if all else fails, eat chocolate and go shopping, because that never fails.
So how was the video?
Sir, it was very good. Last time I had watched 12 or 13 minutes of video, though I could get the glimpses of it, but in this video I could get the complete journey of her cancer illness to how she recovered and how she was able to connect her experiences with the consciousness. So this was good, sir.
So last video you referred to was which video?
Sir, same Anita's video. That was she spoke in TEDx.
Okay, okay. You have heard her speak. That's what you are saying. Okay.
Yeah, sir. It was only that was a short video, and I think this 1 hour 17 minutes video gives the complete glimpses of her experience and journey.
Yeah, because in TED Talks we are confined by the format because they don't allow you beyond a certain time.
Right, sir.
So we have to compress our message. But this gives a holistic picture, like how things happened, what happened, how she recovered, her experience on the other side, and how she connects the dots. So now she is very, vocal about her experience, and she also teaches about empaths and how empaths, need to understand that they're empaths, and because empaths are a type of people who basically, are able to feel other people's feelings, and are very kind and very compassionate, and then they are taken for a ride by many, grosser people who are like free riders and parasites. They like to exploit these people, and these people have a tendency to not be able to say no. So she herself, recognizes herself as an empath, and now these days she talks a lot about that also. Maybe one day we'll discuss that also sometime. But today I just wanted to focus upon, how consciousness and illness are related, and Bruce Lipton was saying that, and she demonstrates that through her case study, because she's a living example of the truth of what Bruce Lipton is saying. Sachit, how about you? How you felt, and what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, it was completely amazing to. I mean, even I have heard this earlier in a shorter form, like what Raj was saying. I think in our SAPG classes we have heard this, but that was a TEDx probably video, and there was a small discussion. But revisiting like any other book, you repeat it and you understand much more. So this was one such experience, and there were so many key elements of, at least at this moment, some very key understandings that is really on top of my mind, especially in the ending when she said that, we don't have to really work towards figuring it out, especially with her experience. She didn't have to pay too much attention on, how to figure out what her purpose was, but because she was really clear that this is what her purpose is, but she didn't have to really figure it out on what has to be done in step 1, step 2. But the key was to just be herself. And by herself here, she was meaning to say the truth that she had understood about what exactly, how consciousness is and how life is. So that is something that is too much of a key element that I'm right now staying with and trying to understand much deeper. And many other key points that, she highlighted earlier in the beginning of the video, her entire experience. And I think we'll discuss further from what you are also wanting to share.
Yeah, so do you mind switching on your video, because we are only 3 people here.
Yeah.
So that I feel a little bit, that I'm talking to people. So, yeah. So, and any questions come to your mind, like because it may trigger a lot of questions. Also because she makes many profound points. So, do any questions come to your mind which I could then use to take the exploration further? Because there are many things she says. Do they raise any questions in your mind?
Probably more clarity on, for example, her experience talks about how she said about her experience of being in the other realm, what her father then said that you need to go back, and then she knew it very clearly that she had to come back, and she had 2 choices. She chose that she comes back, what is going to happen if she doesn't come back? What are the other implications to it in her family? Her husband might pass away because their purpose were linked together so closely and all of it. But when she chose to come back, still the clarity of how the healing happens, right? For example, what Bruce Lipton spoke about, it's about the body is responding to the consciousness. But over here, what is the reflection of the consciousness? The consciousness, does it understand that I am healed at this moment? Or what was the key understanding of the consciousness that she had that it reflected in her body to heal? That some more clarity on on that?
Yeah, so it's a very mysterious question, and it is not possible to perhaps explain verbally and to understand verbally my explanation, but I can intuit what C means, and that intuition I can try to frame in words as best as possible based upon my experience little bit. Obviously, I did not have an NDE, but from my meditative experiences and from my life experiences, what I have experienced so far, from that I can share my intuition. So it seems to me that she had a real experience of her soul, because when she was on the other side, she was basically experiencing herself as a soul. And generally in the NDE, most people relate that they are floating above the body and seeing the body from above, and they floated outside the hall and they floated down the corridor. Such accounts, you may have heard plenty of such accounts. Am I right?
In common, in general, yeah, and also probably few movies try to depict this.
Yeah, but Anita Moorjani's case is not like that. She is not telling that she floated outside the body and she was hovering above the body and then she was floating inside the city or such things. She doesn't say like that. What she was saying that I found myself expanding. That is what is different about her case. She says that I found myself expanding and expanding and expanding and expanding. And as I expanded more and more, more and more, more and more, I started to feel more and more magnificent and more powerful and more pain-free. At some point of time, I was feeling absolutely blissful, magnificent, and there was no pain. Right? That is what she shared. Now, that is very significant, because that shows that what she was experiencing was not the astral body leaving the physical body, and then from the astral body perspective, she is seeing things. That is not what she says. What she says is that she expanded. Now, this I have experienced, this expansion. Many times when I meditate, not now, earlier, in the initial 3-4 years, it used to happen to me. Many times when I meditate, I will not know what has happened to me. I will feel little bit inside and then blissful. And then when I end my meditation, and then when I'm coming to my normal consciousness, I would feel as if I'm shrinking and shrinking and shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. Okay. And in those meditations, see, when I meditate or when anyone meditates, they have all kinds of experiences. It's not one experience. There are millions of experiences, types of experiences, but this was one type of experience which I am sharing, which is correlating to what she is sharing. So this used to happen to me. And in those states, you will not believe, or you will believe also, I don't know. So when I'm sitting in my old cabin in ASB, that corner room where I used to sit, if you remember, before I was shifted to another room. I don't know which batch you belong to. When you met me, I was sitting in the corner room or in the room next to Sri Krishnan. Which one you saw?
I've seen you in the corner room also.
Corner room, right? So in that corner room, I was meditating in those days, I'm telling. So I will feel subjectively my head is like somewhere near the ceiling level, roof level, and my body also a little bit expanded. So obviously, I'm not experiencing my physical body, not possible. But I'm experiencing some body, because there's a palpable feeling I'm shrinking. And then I've come inside the normal, proportions. So that expansion, what she is telling, also in those days when these things used to happen, I used to feel expanded subjectively, so much so that when my wife used to sit on the bed near me, I will say, you sit little bit away, and she will be very horrified. Why you are pushing me away? And I used to say, no, it's little bit painful for me, uncomfortable for me when you're sitting, here. And she's 2 feet away from me. This is very weird. So in those days, I have experienced my own being expanded little bit, and when someone sits 2 feet next to me, I feel as if a little bit uncomfortable. Maybe aura has expanded, something like that. So I relate it to her aura expanding. Her aura expanded and expanded. And that aura, we all have. Kirlian photography is able to capture the auras. So at the aura level, I think that there is soul and there is the aura around the soul. Aura is like the soul's body. the soul's energy body, we can call it like that. And then there is a concept of light body. If you do Google or research about it, there is a concept of light body. So we all have a light body, and that light body feeds on the ananda or bliss. Someday I will share this in India, ancient tradition. I don't know Raj knows about it or not. They used to believe that there are panchakosas. Have you heard about panchakosas, Raj?
Sir, yes, sir. I have heard of it, but unable to recollect now because it's been 6-7 years that I read about it.
Okay. So so in the Panchakosa theory, what it says is that this is propounded by ancient Rishis. So they say that man is composed of 5 sheaths. Kosha is a sheath, just like onion. No, onion has many sheaths. You peel one sheath, then the next sheath comes like that. So in a way, human is also like an onion, and there are many sheaths, 5 sheaths. So these sheaths are Annamaya Kosha, the outermost sheath, like an onion top sheath, which you have to peel. So Annamaya Kosha, Anna means food, Maya means permeated by, and Kosha is sheath. So the outermost sheath of which human is composed is the sheath made by food, and that is obviously body, because body is made by eating food. What we have eaten has been processed by the body to form more body. The child's body has grown to a man's body, a woman's body, by assimilating food. So because this body is made out of food, that is why it's called Annamaya Kosha. Then the next, and we normally experience this most powerfully, most of the time. But we are not limited to the body, there are more layers to us. So the next kosha, which is one layer beneath the body or inside the body, is the Pranamaya Kosha. So Pranamaya Kosha is the energy body, vital energy body. Prana is the energy which animates the body and which helps the body to carry out all its processes: digestion, circulation, assimilation, thinking, everything is powered by prana. Prana is like the petrol for the car, like that. That is the energy which is feeding the body to do its various activities. So Pranamaya Kosha. And this Pranamaya Kosha is composed of, many, nadis. Nadis are like, tubules, subtle level tubules. Obviously, you can't see these nadis under a microscope. No one has been able to see the Pranamaya Kosha. Science dismisses this theory because they can't see it through any scientific instrument. But Rishis have, conceptualized that, and this is, verified in China through the acupressor, because acupressor uses this understanding to treat people, trying to open up these nadis. And in India, it is, basically, it's directly told by the Rishis, Pranamaya Kosha. Homeopathy calls it the vital force. So many, these Reiki people, they are using prana to heal through their hands and all that. So prana or chi or ki is basically energy which is recognized all over the globe in the ancient, cultures, especially in the Eastern, cultures, China and India most notably, Egypt also. So this Pranamaya Kosha, you will feel your hand warm little bit, or there is a temperature in the body. Why it is like? Because there is energy actually which is present. There is a warmth which is present. That represents Pranamaya Kosha. Okay, then going further, and Pranamaya Kosha can be stronger or weaker. When it is stronger, the body is very healthy and vital, and when it is weaker, body falls ill. So in a way, Pranamaya Kosha's job is to energize the body and to keep the body healthy. Now the third sheath underneath the Pranamaya Kosha, when I say underneath, it need not mean that it is smaller. What it means is that you have to penetrate deeper into your awareness to be able to palpably feel these inner sheaths. So the third sheath is Manomaya Kosha. So Manomaya Kosha is the mind sheath. Man is mind. The sheath which is permeated by mind. Now how do you permeate by mind? Idea is that this is the level which is permeated by all your thought patterns, belief patterns, values, your experiences, your memories, etc. That is what permeates this sheath, the Manomaya Kosha. In this Manomaya Kosha, there is believed to be the 7 chakras, Kundalini energy and the 7 chakras and all that. They all lie in the Manomaya Kosha. Then, even deeper than Manomaya Kosha, so Manomaya Kosha accounts for all your moods, all your desires and all your feelings, okay, emotional part of the person in a way. Then the fourth sheath is the Vijnanomaya Kosha. Vijnanomaya Kosha is the intellect sheath. Your intelligence, your understanding, your wisdom, your capacity to reflect, to think, to imagine consequences of your actions, to understand reality. All that, is reflected in the Vijnanomaya Kosha, what we call the intellectual capacity or buddhi part of man. Then that is the fourth layer. And then the fifth layer is the Anandamaya Kosha. So Anandamaya Kosha is what I feel I had been experiencing in my meditation, and I feel is what has been experienced by Anita Moorjani, which expanded. That Anandamaya Kosha, level is generally supposed to be very tough to reach. Only very advanced meditators can reach there after they have made lot of progress. So I feel I was experiencing that sheath in earlier meditations. These days focus is on something else in my meditations. Okay. So these days I don't experience that. Maybe that aspect has settled down. Maybe there are more things to explore. So naturally in meditation things happen not because of my control. Things happen intuitively in some way which is taken care of by a higher intelligence which is in me. Maybe I'm a higher self, Atman or self, soul. Anyway, so this Anandamaya Kosha is believed to feed upon, love, happiness, compassion. So when Anita Moorjani says that you should love yourself unconditionally, she is coming from that level understanding, Anandamaya Kosha level understanding, where we are all children of divine and we are blissful children of divine, and we are meant to enjoy and love and celebrate life and give our contribution. Ananda is happiness. So like we are all basically permeated with happiness, and it is not something that we find from outside. Happiness is something which we all should experience all the time. And why it is taken away from us is because we have been conditioned by society. Now this conditioning is happening where? In this framework which I shared with you, in the Vijnanamaya Kosha. You are forced to believe things which are not true. And then when you are forced to believe things which are not true, you react out of those false beliefs. Now, when you misjudge a situation or misjudge the purpose of your life or misjudge the value of your life or misjudge your own value, inner worth, if you are somehow convinced I am unworthy, if you are somehow convinced that I have let down people, you feel guilt, shame, fear and all that, right? Then what happens? Your Manomaya Kosha level, feeling level, you feel disempowered, you feel frustrated, you feel sad. And then going down further, you feel less energy, Pranamaya Kosha becomes depleted because of low mood, lower level emotions. And then cascading down further, it gets reflected in the body as, initially fatigue, stress, and then slowly, even, bigger diseases like cancer. So this is how I think, things happened in her case. But when she got healed, she got in touch with her soul and she got, expanded. Why? Because her body is in coma. So as a result, the soul is not carrying so much baggage now. It's much lighter. So it somehow, and maybe also I feel she was destined to play the role that she's playing. So there's some divine grace factor also. It is not as if Anita Moorjani is doing on her own. Some grace factor is also there. Maybe her soul's purpose may be this. The soul may have been incarnated with this particular purpose in mind. Maybe this soul itself produced this life experience of cancer. And this was meant to be, if you believe in destiny or astrology and such things, people are meant to play some role. Maybe Anita Moorjani was meant to play this role on this planet. That is why she had this experience. So it was a grace factor that her astral body did not leave the body as happens for most people, but somehow she got in touch with her soul, and so her Anandamaya Kosha expanded like anything. And that is soul's body. So when soul's body expanded like anything, she felt the intrinsic unconditional love that she is made of, the joy that she is made of. And at that level, she experienced her father's soul and her best friend's soul. And she had let her father down in her life, as you heard. She ran away 2 days before the wedding that her father had set up for her. So you can imagine an Indian traditional family, Indian community, South Indian, or I don't know which community he belongs to, her father's condition. No, he would be so horrified that, in India, daughter running away before marriage is like, many families may, or many fathers may commit suicide out of shame. So she was carrying this guilt that I brought this, black spot on my father and my mother's, life. And that guilt may have produced the cancer. But then when she met her father on the other side, her father was only feeling love for her, unconditional love for her. And he had no sense of, being wounded or hurt by her. That healed her, I think, of her major baggage, emotional baggage, most major emotional baggage, that was guilt. I think if her case is to be taken as a fact, then maybe guilt could be a major factor producing cancer, it seems to me, because she carried guilt on two counts. One is, letting down her father and mother and family, and second, with her best friend. Her best friend also was suffering from cancer, and she died 2 years before Anita Moorjani's experience. And Anita, because she was already diagnosed with cancer 4 years prior to her NDE, which means, 2 years before her friend's death, she already was diagnosed with cancer. So because of this fear, because her friend had more advanced stage of cancer, she was worried that if she goes and meets her friend in the hospital or wherever, she will feel more scared. So she is trying to shun away from her future. And that is why she is, all the time spending time on Google, searching this, that, anti-cancer, food and such things. She shares, that I was doing that out of fear, not out of love. In the very end, she says. So in that frame of mind, obviously, anything which reminds her of her future condition, when she will deteriorate, she wants to avoid that. So she never went to see her friend. So that guilt also she was carrying, that I could not be with my friend towards her horrific end. So I think these things were impinging very strongly upon her system, and may have contributed, apart from other things, to her cancer. And maybe when she met both these souls, and these souls only expressed their love for Anita, that guilt melted away. That is one. So obviously that guilt will be stored in the Manomaya Kosa, Vijnanamaya Kosa, that melted away. So the flow of energy through the system. So in the Panchamukha Kosa theory, what happens is that energy flows from the Atman through the Anandamaya Kosa downwards. So idea is, when the blockage is removed, guilt is a huge blockage, because of which, you can't feel happiness. See, what I'm trying to say through Panchakosa theory is that why we can't feel happiness today. Anandamaya Kosa is the deepest seat beyond which there is Atman. So Anandamaya Kosa is not the truth. Truth is embedded inside the Anandamaya Kosa. At the center of the Anandamaya Kosa is the Atman, or the soul, spark of divinity. So idea is that if we are Anandamaya Kosa at the very core, why we are not able to experience Ananda or happiness? Because it is layered over by turbulence in the Vijnanamaya Kosa and the Manomaya Kosa. Faulty understanding in the Vijnanamaya Kosa produces faulty perception, faulty interpretation, which produces negative emotions. So in this case, guilt was the predominant negative emotion that got dissolved, because the people towards whom she felt, that she had let them down, they have unconditionally expressed their love, that they carry no such grudge against her. Now that must be a great relief to her soul. That was one. And second is her experience of her vast self, true self, majestic self. So she could bring that memory back to this body, that I am not this puny little body, I am a magnificent, powerful, omnipotent soul. Now that memory she has brought to this body. So at that level of perception, soul level perception, how can anything earthy like cancer or any illness overcome you? You are so powerful. And you are already healed because you are God's child. So when you think from the brain, cancer is so powerful. But when you think from the soul, you are so powerful. So who will win? That which is more powerful will win. So when she comes back to this very sick body, she comes back as the majestic soul. And she remembers that. And the soul was down with guilt, that has also gone. So the soul could exhibit its power by sending enormous amounts of energy through the Anandamaya kosa. And now the brain, this is Vijnanamaya kosa and the Manomaya kosa and the heart are not filtering it or not preventing it. It's like a callus has been removed from the heart and the brain. So the divine energy from the soul can flow completely through the Pranamaya kosa. So the Pranamaya kosa, you can imagine what will happen to it. If what I am saying is true, what will happen to it? It will become very energetic, is it not? Pranamaya kosa will be very highly depleted, because of which cancer happened. But after the supply has started very powerfully from the Atman again, the Pranamaya kosa will become revitalized very rapidly. So that is what happened to her. And if Pranamaya kosa becomes very vitalized, then body has to heal. That is my theory based upon my understanding of Panchakosa theory. Science will not agree. It's not a scientific answer as per the Western science, but there is a scientific answer, intuitive answer as per the Indian Eastern science.
Makes a lot of connections. I also want to recall that even in Louis L. Hay's book,
You can heal yourself. You can heal yourself.
And that also for cancer, the main the reasoning that she highlights is because of regret, deep regret and guilt. So
yeah, so you see, that is, thank you for that. So that's, yeah, she has a table.
Yeah.
I have read that book. She has a table where she correlates different illnesses to different emotions, and that's a very powerful book, worth reading. I recommend to everyone. Louis Hay was a powerful teacher, so you can heal your life. She believed that any illness can be healed spiritually, and she demonstrated that in her life. So yeah, so you got it there. So maybe guilt produces cancer. If that is true, we know what to avoid if you want to escape cancer.
So my
Guilt and fear. Guilt and fear.
My follow-up question is on that, sir. So guilt and fear is becoming the highlight here. We understand it. And what I understand from what we are doing here in our Grow Your Light sessions is actually trying to address the Vijnanamaya kosha, where, we're trying to rectify our understanding of, various aspects, so that we kind of avoid all the blockages that can come up in our lives through the Vijnanamaya kosha of correcting our understanding. But
very true. So from day one, I have been teaching all these courses with this understanding in mind. Because what you call man is nothing but the Vijnanamaya kosa and the Manomaya kosa. Is it not true? What you think and what you feel is what a man is, yes or no?
Yeah, part of us.
And body is just basically the vehicle of the mind. Mind is these two only, no? Thoughts and emotions, am I right?
Yes.
And body is the vehicle through which this faculty of thinking and emotions reflects itself and connects to life. So when I say emotions, I mean desires also. Every feeling that you feel, no, is basically inside the manomaya. So when you feel like eating a jalebi or or whatever, you like samosa or whatever you like, it is basically a desire. It's an emotion. You want to enjoy that thing, right? So that is one part of life. You desire things, you feel things, you love people, you love this, that, or you hate this, that, you're angry about this. I mean, all that subjective aspect is the manomaya kosa, and you know that when your perspective changes, emotions can change. Is it not? When you understand that someone misbehaved with you because of some particular reason, it's easier for you to let go and forgive, no? Once you know the reason, is it not? So which shows that the Vijnanamaya kosa has a primacy over the Manomaya kosa. If you understand better, if you feel better. Feel better means, not I'm saying feel better means improvement in mood. Feel better means feel in a more competent manner. Your feelings are more appropriate, more in tune with the reality of the situation. But then who understands the reality of the situation? The brain, the Vijnanamaya kosa. So from day one, I understand this, and hence I teach all these courses. I know that understanding is the main thing which makes us human. You remember in my classes, I used to tell that a man can not only think, but can also think about his thoughts. Man can not only feel, but also feel about his feelings. You remember that? So that is where, because see, I can't take the student to his soul, no? I can only take the student to a better clarity. So that soul is a given. Anandamaya Kosa is a given. Divine energy flowing through you is a given. It is just that your Vijnanamaya Kosa, your understanding, and your Manomaya Kosa, your moods and emotions, they should allow the divine energy to reach you. You means the conscious person that you are. So in my understanding of life, we are a two-part being. We are a divine being with inherent divinity, and we are a personality with a thinking and feeling faculty, which reacts to the here and now reality, earthy reality of this lifetime. Right. So we are a two-part being, and there is a exchange going on between the both parts of the being. Soul is very much there, and personality is very much there, and they interact. And the soul has projected the personality for fulfillment of its purposes. Okay. And depending upon the depth of awareness or awakening of the soul, the personalities can be more refined or less refined. A soul which is deeply asleep will produce a very tamasic creature, even as a man. But a soul which is highly developed because of past, efforts that it has made in different lifetimes to wake up, then it will project a very powerful personality which is much more lucid and clear. So it also tells you that why it is important to not waste human life. Anita Moorjani's case also tells us why it is very important to not waste human life, to make every effort to wake up as much as possible to your innate divinity by getting rid of your faulty beliefs and faulty thought patterns. Because that is what is preventing you from realizing your innate divinity. So that is what we are trying to accomplish.
I have one more question, sir.
Okay.
Because it's again, I'm able to relate to these aspects. When she said about, I've been living my life choosing everything with coming out of fear. I'm able to relate that a lot of places, and I'm still holding a lot of fear. It could be, I'm not sure, I'm not deep dived into which aspect of fear for what. But my question is actually about how do we deal with, for example, you highlighted about guilt. If someone has done something or if something wrong has happened and we, kind of regret it, how we can understand it and kind of forgive the other person. But if it is my own mistake, if I have to be forgiven by someone else, but she had an experience where she saw her, dad in the other realm and then they forgive. She only experienced love and the forgiveness was understood. Then the experience completely melted off the guilt. That was experiential and it was extremely powerful for her. But for our discussion and understanding in the Vijnanamaya Kosha of guilt, I think you also earlier once in our classes you highlighted about the golden mean, and you spoke about how on the seesaw as a metaphor and how we can balance our effort of instead of having complete guilt, you can probably look at it as regret being in the golden mean. Probably I'm not very clear of it. Can you share more on it if that helps?
Yeah, so
And sorry, if I'll just the continuation question is the same emotion about fear also. What would be the golden mean? This caution is what I remember, but how do I practice it more? How do I practically practice it in everyday life?
Yeah, the golden mean thing what you are trying to recall is Aristotle's virtue table.
Yeah.
Aristotle, the great Greek philosopher, had shared a virtue table. In the virtue table, excess becomes a vice, and a lack also becomes a vice. For example, excess of courage is recklessness. That's a vice. And a shortage of courage is cowardice, which is again a vice. So when you're in the golden mean, that is courage. Courage is healthy. That's what you're trying to recall, right?
Yeah.
The golden mean. So we need not confine ourselves to golden. That's a framework.
Yeah.
And it's a very useful framework, but maybe it is not very useful here, in the question that you're asking. Okay. So as far as it comes to forgiving ourselves for something wrong that we have done, we perceive that we have done something wrong in the past, and that produces a guilt, right? Right. And See, what is the problem with guilt? And what is the function of guilt? Why nature has given us this guilt? That is what we should understand. Every emotion that nature has given us, there is a purpose behind that. Nature is not foolish. First of all, we have to respect nature because nature is designed by God. Okay. So, purpose of guilt is to realize our mistakes and to make corrections in our character, in our thought pattern, so that in future we don't make the same mistake. And since everyone is a soul, comes from the same God, if you hurt someone, you are hurting divinity. So obviously you will not feel comfortable. At the deepest level, your divinity, you will not feel happy about it because that is not your real nature. Your nature is love. So how can a loving being hurt someone or harm someone knowingly? Right. So guilt arises when, because of some mistake that you have committed, someone gets harmed. And you feel it is your action which has produced that harm. And you cannot absolve yourself of that sense of responsibility. So behind the guilt is a sense of responsibility that, I was responsible for causing this harm to someone or causing this pain to someone. So it is a positive, thing in the sense that obviously when guilt you experience, it's a painful experience, you will try to avoid making such mistakes in the future. So it helps you to correct your behavior. That is one function. And second is that it may motivate you to transcend your ego or pride and say sorry, make amendments if possible. So you may be able to make amendments and rectify your mistake by reducing the harmful consequences, or maybe saying sorry. It would be as simple as that, right? And if the other person forgives you, then again guilt is resolved. Okay. But if a guilt is not resolved because father died and the friend died in this case, and I am in Hong Kong, right?
Yeah.
I can't meet them, and I don't know whether they have forgiven me or not. But I learned that they are forgiven only in the other realm. So does it mean we have to die and go to the other realm to see that? No, I don't think so. What I feel is that intention is a very powerful healer. If you have a good intention at heart, you will know. Right? That is why, a person who wakes up, even partially, first thing which happens to them is that their intention becomes pure. Before they wake up, even partially, when they are living completely as an animal, they may do anything they like for their selfish needs. They may exploit, they may cheat, they may manipulate, they may do crime. There are people like that, many people like that. Now, they are not in touch with their soul. They are behaving like brute animals. It is only power. Their main motivator is power. See, money is power only. So, at the root level, their main motivator is the Manipur chakra, the power center. And Manipur chakra, which is vitiated. Okay. So, Manipur chakra is the third chakra in the navel area. So, at that chakra level, a person exhibits tremendous ego. Remember Ramayana story? Rama, sends the arrow in the navel of the Ravana. Why? Because Ravana is a powerful ego. So, idea is that Valmiki is teaching us that ego resides in the navel center, Manipur chakra. These are subtle teachings. Anyway, so when a man has even partially woken up, then that person cannot be, crassly selfish. Can't be selfish in a vulgar manner, because then when a man is partially woken up, guilt starts to pinch. For a criminal, guilt doesn't arise. Why? Why? Because Manomaya Kosa is only experiencing greed. Is only experiencing the happiness of conquest. These two feelings are there. Greed and happiness of conquest, that I conquered something, conquered someone. Or the happiness of beating someone, two top players playing, competing. It is Manipur chakra playing each other. And there's a joy in beating the other guy. That is the competitive kind of mindset. You can become world's best player, But that doesn't mean that you are a very evolved human. You can be a very beautiful tennis player, but you are not an evolved human. You have not gone beyond the third level, Manipur Chakra. So at that level, even criminals may be there. Because it's a competitive world out there. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there. So guilt will not arise. Why? Because the Manomaya Kosa is experiencing greed and the power. Glory behind power. You can kill millions also to feel powerful. There are people like that, okay. So they will not feel guilt. Why? Because they're vibrating at a lower level. But the very fact that you experience guilt is a very good sign. That shows you are experiencing life at the Anahat Chakra, heart center. You feel other person's pain. It was caused by you. Anahat Chakra is above the Manipur Chakra. The lower three chakras are demonic plane. Lower three chakras are demonic plane. No, there are three lokas in Indian mythology. Three lokas means inside us also. If you are in the lower three planes, you go to hellish realms, meant for demons. If you are in the middle level, Anahat Chakra and this Shuddhi, you go to the Pitralok, where your ancestors live. And if you can reach the Agya Chakra, you go to heavenly planes. And if you can reach Sahasrara, you reach Vaikuntha, which is liberation. You become a god, okay? It's very simple. So idea is that the fact that you experience guilt is good news. That shows you are no longer a brute. You are a human. And you feel other people's pain. And hence you feel I have been the cause behind their pain. So you feel guilt. Okay. Now what is the solution? Solution is this simple, that you have the duty of not only loving the other person, but also the duty of loving you. So that is where self-love comes. That is why she is teaching self-love. So why self-love is important is because if you love yourself unconditionally, you will know that it is inevitable on earth in this physical lifespan to make mistakes. Vijnanamaya Kosa level understanding is that it is inevitable to make mistakes. Why it is inevitable to make mistakes? Because of limitations of your knowledge and competencies. How much you understand life, how much you understand the other person's life. Mistakes are inevitable. So you forgive yourself already for your mistakes, not after making the mistake. See, you can transcend guilt only if you reach this level of understanding that I will always make mistakes. I'm only human. I'm not a god. So if you accept that I will always make mistakes, this understanding plus pure intention is solution for all guilt. Did I answer your question?
Yes, definitely.
At the Vijnanamaya Kosa level, the understanding level, if you understand that I will always make mistakes, this was not the last mistake, I will make even more mistakes. And I already forgive myself for my mistakes. Why? Because my intention is not to make mistakes. My intention is not to hurt people. So if you can look into your inner heart and see your intention is pure, and at the same time acknowledge your lack of omniscience. In a way, guilt also shows you are a proud individual. You are unconscious about it. You are proud that you will never make mistakes. Is hidden behind the guilt.
Yes.
No, drop that. You will always make mistakes.
True.
You will make many mistakes. So if you know that, you will already forgive yourself because your intention is pure. That is why I always teach that there are two poles to man: intention and ability. Mistake, if it is a fault of ability pole, I can always forgive myself because I always know that I am not fully capable. I am only human. Have I answered your question?
Yes.
So that clarity, using your intellect, that I have intention and I have ability. My ability is limited, my intention is pure. Hence, mistakes happen, I forgive myself. And then, having forgiven myself, I do my level best to make the rectification.
Yes.
Can I say sorry? Can I make up in some manner? Can I amend in the situation by doing something good now? Okay. So now my action is not coming from guilt, it is coming from love. So guilt becomes love. You see?
Yes.
Or compassion. So heart lets go of guilt and starts feeling love again. And that is a very, very important secret of happiness. Understanding your limitations and accepting your weaknesses is a very powerful factor producing happiness. Because guilt and shame are major, eaters of happiness. They take away happiness. And both happen because of lack of understanding. Okay. Anything more? Raj, any questions, any observations or something, or shall we wind up?
So nothing for today, sir. It's a very good discussion. Sashit brought up interesting questions. In fact, I was unable to connect how the guilt and regret, fear, some of these negative emotions could lead into the diseases. But I'll take the name of the book from Sashit and I'll read something about it, sir. I think I should be able to connect the dots. That was one question that I had in terms of how the negative emotions are connected to the illnesses in the human body. I think now I'm able to connect the dots.
I explained that, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you so much. Okay. Bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Sashit.
Thanks.